Thank you everyone for joining us today for the IOSH Future Leaders webinar on mental health and wellbeing. We have a fantastic panel with us here today. I'm truly honoured to have the following panellists. Liam Kelly, Environment, Health and Safety Manager at Trim Formworks. Joe Donnelly, Board Member, Tackling Awareness of Mental Health Issues. Rob Stephenson, Mental Health Campaigner and Founder of CEO, Form and InsideOut. And Heather Beach, Founder and Managing Director of the Healthy Work Company. All of these have been doing truly amazing things when it comes to mental health and well-being. I truly look to them all for inspiration. First question I'll direct towards Rob and Heather. What are the main mental health and well-being issues we are facing in today's world? What is causing these, and are there any effective solutions?
To me or to Rob? Sorry, darling.
Whichever one wants to go first.
Oh, go on, Rob. You go first then.
Right, thanks for having me. And I'm not sure if you can see my video, but it looks like it might have frozen, so apologies if that's the case. So mental health and well-being, what are the main issues? We are facing unprecedented and challenging times. And I think there was a mental health crisis before the pandemic, which has now been amplified. But at least we are being more and more aware of those challenges in the workplace. But I think pulling out a few themes for us to talk about, we've been sprinting for 6 months through this pandemic to adapt, to pivot, to keep in business. And we find ourselves 6 months later still sprinting, yet we're in a marathon. So I think one of the first challenges that I'd like to highlight is around the propensity for burnout, because we're working harder, we're working longer hours. If we're working from home remotely, we're not taking the same amount of breaks in the day. So all of this is adding to an increased risk of burnout. I think the second thing I'd like to talk about is that of connection. So the need to be physically distant, and I hate the word social distancing, we need to be physically distant and socially connected. But that physical distance has meant that we really are eroding our human connections that often we get from the workplace. So I think there's definitely a challenge there around facilitating those connections and how do we replicate what we'd normally get. So I think those are the two that I'd like to pull out that are really specific to the pandemic. But we've really seen a rise in the general level of anxiety, depression, and we've seen some pretty harrowing statistics come out of the ONS and a recent survey of the Centre for Mental Health as well. So I think my message is mental health and mental health challenges is a big deal as a result of the pandemic.
Thanks, Rob. Do you want me to have a go now?
Yeah, I was just going to apologise for the loss of video there. That was all. But yeah, if you want to carry on, Heather.
Gotcha. Oh, we've got us back, have we? I totally agree with everything that Rob said. I think particularly among people actually like yourselves and HR professionals, senior management teams, there's a real risk of burnout. You know, there's always too much to do at the moment. And we really have to learn to self-manage much more than we have in the past to make sure that we do give ourselves time to switch off and recharge, because we're not effective if we don't. The biggest issues that we're seeing, so during the pandemic, we ran a survey to our professional networks, and we found that actually during lockdown itself, a quarter of people actually had better mental health than usual. A third, unfortunately, were really struggling, but a quarter had better mental health. And that was about having more time. That was about being able to reconnect with their families, maybe pick up a hobby that they'd had in the past. But we're now seeing that obviously people are going back to work, and that isn't those people that had better mental health due to lockdown. They're no longer in that position. So what we're seeing now are two things. One is massive extremes in individual situations. So some are, as Rob said, missing that human connection. They're perhaps on their own. Some are in circumstances it's truly, truly impossible to work. You know, they've got kids, elderly parents, way too much going on at home. And so that picture of extremes is huge. And the other thing that we keep hearing everywhere is this idea of uncertainty. Now, uncertainty was always present. If we learned something over the last few months, it's the fact that nothing in life is guaranteed. but it's never been so in our faces as it is right now. And uncertainty triggers that stress response system in us. So again, it comes down to us as human beings to learn how to self-manage, how to come back to the present moment, look at breathing, and understand how to manage that better ourselves.
Just want to touch on a point there. You mentioned about flexible working. Are the best companies, or the companies that are performing and doing better through this, are they offering more flexible working than some of the other companies that are not offering that?
I wouldn't be able to sell whether they were doing better or not. I think that effectively, to be in a good position right now, you have to be incredibly flexible, adaptable, and those are the key areas. And I would have thought that flexible working would go alongside that. But we do see most organisations now are looking to the longer term to basically look at how they can manage this whole area, which is really new for many of us and actually has its own challenges. It's brilliant from the point of view of we don't have to commute anymore, but there are a huge range of challenges associated with it too, which we need to experiment with and get on top of.
I could add to that, Robert, if I may, because I think,
Yeah.
you know, we've been forced to work a lot more flexibly. And I think that the more forward-thinking organizations are actually helping individuals in the workplace to adapt to that, particularly if they're not used to working remotely and flexibly before. So things like just providing a bit of education on, you know, how to structure some breaks in the day, how to get those moments of recovery, inviting people to take their lunch break rather than just walk through, switching your computer off at the end of the day. It's simple things that can actually kind of demark work and home, because, you know, are we working from home or are we living at work these days? So I think really good forward-thinking companies are helping people make that transition, because many people won't have worked remotely or flexibly before.
You know, I think I definitely have to agree with that. One of the examples I can think of off the top of my head was during lockdown, I reached out to another firm, and the contact that I usually deal with didn't get back to me until about 7 o'clock. And they explained that their firm had allowed them to work their hours later in the day, so that you could cover the child being off. So they'll take turns, and I thought it was really good and really positive way of doing it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Moving on to the second question then, what are the common indicators that people may be struggling with mental health issues? What advice can you give to new OSH professionals on approaching someone you suspect may be struggling? And I'll direct that towards Heather and Joe.
Do you want me to go first, Heather, or do you want ladies first?
You both go, that's okay. I know you were keen to answer this one.
No, look, guys, my name's Joe. I'm from TAMHI. So we've been doing a lot of work with big corporates recently. So PricewaterhouseCoopers, Allstate, Lloyds, TSB, and Halifax Foundation. So we've been doing a bit of work with organisations around mental health and emotional well-being and signs sort of to look out for. And we use sort of an abbreviation called SPOTA, as in spot a sign. So what we're encouraging workplaces to do, and it's become more difficult with COVID, but pre-COVID and during COVID, they're trying to work this out. So spot S. So social isolation, what does it look like in the workplace? Historically, it was staff members physically not showing up. So if they're not showing up, something's up. They're not in the right frame of mind. They might need a bit of help and support. Or it's staff members being there but not being there. So that's someone who's physically in the building, but they're distant, they're uncooperative, they're not responsive. And then we have the added caveat of COVID, which is basically promoting social isolation, unfortunately, where we've taken people who normally thrive in a sort of a team building environment and isolating them. And I know, for speaking from my own personal experience, I didn't enjoy working in isolation, didn't enjoy working from home, and I didn't enjoy being apart from the team. But exacerbate that to hundreds and thousands of people who are currently going through that now, it's a really difficult challenge and time for them. So we're losing that social connection. And I suppose you've touched on it. How do organisations know that their staff members are in the right frame of mind? The only thing I've heard in terms of organisations checking on staff is that they have their keyboard set up to measure how many times they click or how many times that they're active online, and I don't think that's really sort of good for mental health and emotional well-being. The next thing we're looking toward again, which COVID exacerbated, was physical health. So during lockdown, we either all got fit or we all overate. So what we would notice in the workplace is we would have staff members that are either looking sort of, they're gaining weight or they're losing weight rapidly. And what we would normally pertain that to would be a relationship breakdown has triggered that comfort eating or trying to get themselves in shape to basically impress whoever the relationship broke down with. Then we would also have staff members coming in looking sort of scruffy, run down, ragged, unkempt, not getting wasted. And there are the things you would have picked up on. But what we try and encourage is that, yes, it's ultimately an organisation's responsibility to look out for their staff, but it's our responsibility as co-colleagues, because the people we're looking out for would tend to be the people we care about and sit beside. So we've all got a role to play in it. The next one's obvious changes, which is self-explanatory. So you have staff members coming in who are teary, are struggling, are making it blatantly apparent that they're going through a difficult, challenging time. And it's how we sort of approach that and deal with that very sensitively. And then it's tough times. And tough times can be found out through two means. One is someone tells you they're going through tough times, or two, you hear it on the grapevine. So that's someone who's lost someone. And I don't care what anybody says, if anybody loses a loved one, they're not going to perform to the optimum level that they would perform prior to that. And it's about what structure an organisation puts in place to support them. Now, what we found, all our big organisations are doing, they've all appointed wellbeing committees. So they've all got representation from across the spectrum, be it the sort of the IT guys, to the HR guys, to the senior management, all working in collaboration for well-being within the organisation. They're coming at it from a positive angle, first and foremost, so it's not all doom and gloom, mental ill health, mental illness. It's positive mental health and emotional well-being. It's how does someone feel connected to the company, which again, COVID's causing challenges, and it's putting measures in place to create an environment where people feel comfortable asking for help and support, and those that are providing it talk about what's going on, listen, care, and ultimately connect. So I know Northern Ireland Electricity would be a company I work with. They have a dedicated counselling service that they bring in. So if any staff member is struggling, they initiate sort of a process to get that person on to speak to dedicated professionals. But it's that sort of sensitivity of approaching them, identifying signs that they've looked out for, they've noticed, and then ultimately passing them on. So that's how I would sort of identify signs to look out for and how to deal with it. But again, COVID makes it a bit difficult because we're looking at people on screens and it's hard to identify if there's something up or if there's something wrong. And the other thing, as Heather alluded to, what's going on in the background, in the family, looking after the kids, trying to work while be productive while being a father and a teacher is a really, 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 really challenging thing. So it's, once we'll pass the other.
For me, this is actually a great opportunity for health and safety professionals to role model some of the skills that they have in other areas. So we know, don't we, that, when we're looking at why somebody's exhibiting an unsafe behaviour, that we are far better to approach that with curiosity and try to ask a lot of questions and be kind of non-judgmental when we're listening to that person. And I think that this is the same skill set really that we're looking for here, is that we're asking people to we use an acronym ABC. So A, awareness, B, be present, C, co-create a plan. We add a D on for managers, because if you're somebody's manager, you really need to be aware of your duties under the Equalities Act, because they are different to if you're just a peer. So we've also had to pretty much rewrite most of our training, because all of ours was about, seeing somebody face to face, walking side by side the shops with them, all of those things that are actually inappropriate right now. But what we found is that when we look at can you judge the signs that someone's struggling over a screen or over a phone, we think you absolutely can, in exactly the same way as you can when you're seeing them face to face. So yeah, that's what I would say.
Interesting that you say that. I think I'd definitely have to agree with that. From my own personal experience, I think there's little signs when you look on camera. People could have the behavioural traits that are harder to identify, but you can still see something there. Similarly, you could see the background in someone's house might be different to what it usually would be. I think Rob's got a point that he wants to add on to this. So, Rob, if you want to make a point.
Thank you, Robert. And Yeah, I think there's one other thing that we can do is ask the question, and in our catch-ups over Zoom or Teams or whatever it might be, is go around the Zoom room and say, how are you today? So one of the projects that I've been working on to help with this is something called the form score. So you can see my background there. It's a 7 out of 10, and people are much more comfortable saying how they're feeling with a number out of 10 rather than saying, I'm experiencing anxiety or isolation or depression today. And it can be a really nice, easy way to get people to check in. And then the manager, if someone said I'm a 4 out of 10, you don't need to go into why during that meeting, but then you could follow up and say, hey, I can see you might be struggling. What's going on? Can we have a catch up? So I think, it doesn't need to be a number out of 10, but that act of asking the question and creating an open culture where people feel safe in answering that question, however you choose to do it, I think is super important.
Can I just say I absolutely love this. It's so useful. So we've now stolen it entirely. We always acknowledge you, obviously, Rob, but we use it in all of our training, because asking senior leaders, for example, at the beginning of each session, what's your form, actually is a really non-intrusive way of finding out how they're getting on.
Yeah, well, it's interesting, isn't it? Because mental health, and sorry to digress a second, Robert, it's got a brand problem, right? So we say the words mental health, we think of head in the hands, suffering, illness, people struggling. Whereas actually, if we can have a lighter term that people are more comfortable with, what's your form today, what's your score today, then people are much more comfortable in expressing it, because actually we all have mental health. And 100% of us will know what it's like to struggle with our mental health as a result of the pandemic to one degree or another. So we need to break down those barriers and give people a safe language to communicate.
No, I completely agree. I'm a big fan of the form. To a bit of a personal revelation, I sadly had a family member pass away, and that form scoring, just saying a score out of 10, was a lot better than having to explain, the ins and outs of how I was feeling that day. So I think it is really good, and it helped me personally as well. Number 3 then. Without dealing with any specifics, can you think of any occasions where someone's mental health problems were helped by a good workplace, and what was the approach? And I'm going to direct that towards Rob.
Yeah, thank you. And you know what, I probably will deal in some specifics, if I may, because I think good practice deserves being called out, and the organisations that I can reference here wouldn't mind me saying so. So I think for me, there are many good examples of workplaces that help someone with mental health problems, but I think it starts with an open culture and one of support. So I'll give you an example. One of the things I do is publish a list of senior workplace leaders who are open about the fact they have a mental health challenge. And one of those role models on the InsideOut leaderboard is a chap called Mark Twigg, who works in a PR business. And he founded the business, was open about his clinical depression about 3 years ago. And what that did as a leader speaking out, created a culture where 7 or 8 people then put their hands up and said, I'm struggling too with whatever they were struggling with. Some of them got adjustments to the role and stayed with the business where they might have ordinarily moved on. But then the story gets interesting, because another chap, a guy called Rob Agnew, realized the positive reputation of the organization before applying to join, and was open about the fact that he's bipolar, like me, through the interview process. On joining the firm, his boss, Mark, could then work out how best to manage him. And the outcome of this was Rob did not have a single episode of mania for the 2.5 years he worked with the business. And he puts that down to 2 things. One, he'd got his boss, Mark, looking out for him and spotting the signs of when he might be starting to struggle. But also he wasn't carrying the burden of pretending to be happy when he was not, or pretending to be something he was not. So it is the power of being open. I'm fortunate enough to work with a lot of organizations that have leaders being open, and really that can help people get the help they need, because then they can put the support in place. But the big problem, I think, out there at the moment, because of the stigma, and I saw that referenced in one of the questions, is people often feel nervous about tapping into the resources that the firm provides. So we have to create open cultures where stigma is addressed, where conversations are normalized. And I think leadership have a really strong role. And again, leaders sharing their stories when they're comfortable have a strong role to play in that as well. I think secondly, I'd refer to an example of Deloitte. And Deloitte, one of my contacts at Deloitte was experiencing some anxiety, and again felt comfortable going to his boss straight away to say, I'm experiencing anxiety. And his boss said, right, take some time, go and take what you need, work in a different way for it until you recover. And again, that I think shortened the process of him getting to a period of recovery. So for me, it's about creating open cultures and then having the resources to support people when they're struggling. And I know we'll come on to this, providing the literacy on how to proactively manage mental health as well.
I think you're touching on the care aspect of leadership there as well. I think, one of the things I noticed there was that real authenticity of care and that leadership skill, and it really is a leadership skill. Heather, do you want to elaborate on Rob's points?
Yeah, I agree. Obviously, I agree exactly with what Rob said. I think that the problem is sometimes it can get lost at middle manager level as well. So if you don't give a middle manager any kind of scope, for example, if you have an HR or a health and safety, but probably an HR team that's very, very kind of locked down in terms of what they offer and what they don't offer, that middle manager can be afraid to give somebody the flexibility that they may need. And I think a lot of it falls down at that point. I don't think anybody does it on purpose, but they can really undermine somebody's well-being by, for example, not giving them the appropriate amount of leave they need for an issue, or not being flexible enough around an issue such as childcare or something like that. So I think as organisations, we need to give managers as much flexibility to be able to manage the team in the most appropriate way for that individual possible.
I agree 100% there. All right, I'll move on to the fourth question then. What do you believe the future looks like in terms of mental health and well-being? What top tips do you have for our future leaders and new OSH professionals on making a difference in this area? And I'm going to direct that to Heather first.
So for me, the most important thing is that we all gain better literacy in this area. And from I'm referring probably to what Rob said here, but expanding on that the conversation has all been very much about mental illness. We know that mental health itself has a brand problem, and it has a brand problem because we've created it. We talk about mental health being important, and then we immediately talk about mental illness, and actually going into detail about what some of these mental illnesses are. And actually it isn't about that. Yes, we know that there are people that have a genetic or a circumstantial or a mix of both which will trigger a serious mental illness, but this is far more about the fact that any single one of us can struggle with the way that our lives are right now. And I also agree, we were struggling before this. We used to stand in front of teams who were all completely overworked, who had a commute, who had a massive social life, who had all those things that they were trying to do. And now we've added a layer on top of that, which is the uncertainty, the economic factors, the working from home factors, and just understanding and improving all of our literacy around what makes good individual well-being. What do I as an individual have to be responsible for in order to manage myself? What do I as a manager need to know, and how do I need to be to create good well-being in my team? And then also as organizations, what do we need to put in place as processes, both proactive and reactive, to make sure that we manage our teams as best as we possibly can? So my advice for future leaders in this area, and I know that a lot of you are really interested in this, which is fantastic to see, is just read as much as you can get your hands on, study as much as you can, go to every CPD event that you can, because this is a vast subject which nobody knows inside out from every angle.
That was fantastic. That I think I've just got to say that's absolutely brilliant about reading as much as you can. There's a lot out there, but definitely the more you can take in, the more you can look to apply. Rob, I'm going to come to you now.
Yeah, so the future, what does the future look like? And I think it depends on your level of optimism, but I am definitely an optimist. And I think one thing that we'll get from COVID and the pandemic is we'll have more empathy for those that struggle with mental health and mental ill health. And I think we'll have a greater understanding of what is driving our mental well-being across the board. But for me, the future, and I think this needs to happen, we're seeing signs of it. We were seeing signs of it before. The UK is pretty good at this. We need to be better. But it is treating mental health and well-being as a strategic priority of the organization alongside other business imperatives. Because if you look at the stats, you know, the Deloitte analytics that back up Stephenson Pharma that were updated this year, 45 billion is the cost to UK employees pre the pandemic, the employers pre the pandemic. 29 billion of that is due to presenteeism. It's people underperforming because of suboptimal mental health. Now, you can see that as a horrific cost and a horrific stat, or you can see it as a great opportunity, again, depending on whether you're glass half full or glass half empty. But for me, I see that as a great opportunity to invest in the mental health and well-being of our people, because it's the right thing to do, but also to gain in productivity. But actually, the pandemic has changed all that. I think that investment and treating it as a strategic priority is absolutely essential right now. And I think the businesses that come out of this well will be the ones that do that and really don't just pay lip service to this, but help people, because people need help. They need help in managing their time. They need help in managing their day. They need help in gain that literacy that Heather mentioned about proactively managing well-being. They need help in terms of a culture that allows them to say, I'm struggling, because millions of people globally are struggling right now. All of that. So I think we will see it being prioritized. I think the other thing is, if you look at what a good integrated strategy looks like in the workplace, it's got awareness, and a lot of business are doing awareness and breaking the stigma. But then it's a suite of resources that people can tap into when they're struggling. But I think increasingly the future will look like a change in the way that we're providing benefits to help people proactively manage well-being. So traditionally we have gym memberships and we have kind of Bupa or whatever that might be. I think the future looks like a suite of benefits where there is personalization and choice and budgets assigned to the individual, because Headspace is great for the people who like to meditate. The gym is great for the people that like going to the gym. Somebody might need to do something socially, be it be a part of a choir or a woodwork lesson or whatever it might be. Our well-being is so personalized and individual. We need to be better at helping everybody in the workplace engage with it. And for me, I think that's where I see the future going in terms of how we provide benefits.
I just love what Rob just said. I can't agree more. I get so tired of people telling me that exercise is the key. Because for me, if you tell me to run 5 miles every day, I'd be really, really upset, because I will only run for a bag of chips. But there's different things appeal to different people, and our recipe for happiness is so individual. So trying to understand what makes us as individuals happy, and then for organizations to provide a suite that you can tap into, is brilliant.
I absolutely love that. I think that's brilliant. Yeah, just fantastic. Customize it to the person. Brilliant. Joe, do you want to jump in here?
I can just give a live example, which probably brings together everything the guys were talking about. I'm working with Allstate. They have a health and wellbeing committee set up, and it's focused on health and wellbeing, not just the sort of the doom and gloom of mental health and emotional wellbeing, but the positivity. So what they're doing is the suite of resources. We're currently working on a suite of resources which we made available to staff members. The way our train of thought that we're going to roll it out is we're going to make a fact sheet information, be it positive or negative, available every month, which we backed up by a video, backed up by personal stories, and inadvertently then backed up by links. If you want to know more information, click on this, which will go to credible public health agency Northern Ireland information sites. So they're making it available to their staff, thousands of staff. They're an IT-based company. And it's drip feeding it rather than trying to bring them all in to train them over sort of a number of days or hours. We're just going to give them short, here's a fact sheet, here's some information, and here's more links. They're also going to communicate a clear pathway of support. So what happens in the event that a member of staff needs support, what they do and what actions are taken. And then they're also going to be doing a lot of sort of work around the Take 5 Steps for Wellbeing. So championing sort of connection, volunteering opportunities, being active if need be, learning new things and how to take notice. So all that there will come together to basically promote a really sort of healthy, focused workplace. And we're involved in it. It's an exciting opportunity to be involved in.
Thank you, Joe. Question 5 then. How can you OSH professionals develop their knowledge in this area, and what training is available that you recommend? I'm going to come to Heather for that one.
So this is hilarious because this is one of those where you light the blue touch paper and retire, I think, because I put this on Facebook on my Healthy Work Group Facebook page. It's a group. You're all welcome to join it. We've got lots of future leaders on there already. And basically, I got some quite shocking, what I thought were quite shocking responses around, you don't need to do any education. It's just about expanding your network. The reality is that this is a huge topic, and trying to get to grips with it, and thinking you know everything, well, that's impossible. But I think that, like with everything, there's a balance between expanding your network and finding out what other people are doing, having the right soft skills and emotional intelligence yourself to be good at it, and equally going away and doing ideally some formal learning, perhaps some informal learning if need be, but some formal learning is great. And there are lots of masters available in various aspects. So you've got masters in wellbeing, you've got neuroscience, you've got applied positive psychology, you've got organizational development theories. From a CPD perspective, both IOSH and NEBOSH do wellbeing programs that you can participate in. But also, I would recommend just reading as much you can get your hands on, attending every event that you can. Because there's loads of free CPD in this area. I love Action for Happiness. They do loads of CPD, it's not billed as CPD, but they have great speakers who talk about aspects of positive psychology effectively. So that's another thing to get to have a look at too. But, I do think that it's really interesting, but well-being is one of those things where people think, well, we're all human. All I need to do is have had an experience where my mental health has been impacted and I'm suddenly an expert. And actually that just isn't the case. There is so much that you can study and understand, and thinking is changing all the time because there's research going on all the time in this area.
Thank you for that. Question 6 then. Is it fair to say new OSH professionals can start to become role models in this area? I'm going to come to Liam with this one. I love some of the work that he's done in the past behind the scenes with the IOSH Future Leaders, so I'm going to come to him with this one.
Yeah, so I suppose for me, Rob, sort of as a sort of reasonably new safety person, the goal for me is to encompass everything that we can do, so health, safety, and well-being. So from the off, I've sort of tried to broaden my skills, and from a future leaders point of view, one of the things and one of the recommendations that I would certainly promote for people coming to the business is that, it's no longer a case of old style health and safety where a checklist is suitable for all options, I suppose. We need to be more versatile with our skills. We need to sort of be a bit more personable, and more than ever, that soft skills are more important than I suppose they were previously. The old sort of style of leading with the stick is, I would say, is gone, I suppose, and rightly so. People don't respond well to being told what to do or being talked down to. I think the key for safety people and safety professionals is to create the personal skills between sort of yourself, those on the cold face and middle management. How do you bridge that gap? It is a difficult one. You need to be confident with your approach, and you need to be able to pick up on the tales that people are giving you. And I suppose having people like Joe, Rob, and Heather on this type of webinar allows likes of me, you, and anybody else who's in the OSH profession to sort of gain knowledge from these guys and ultimately build their experiences. So, from a safety point of view, I think there's still a lot of work to do. I don't think we're going to get there sort of quickly, but I would hope that with an understanding of where we want to go, I would hope that ultimately we will all get there in the end. So that's just from a safety point of view, and from somebody on the Future Leaders Steering Committee. I do think there's a lot of work to do, and I think probably breaking down the stigma that's tried to be broken down for a lot of years is still going to be fairly difficult. But hopefully, if we have an understanding of what's going on, then ultimately we can all move forward in the right direction.
Thank you for that. One of the things that I just want to highlight is the soft skills. What Liam didn't say that is every time you ring Liam, the first thing he asks you is, how are you? So immediately I'm telling him how I am. And I think that's just such a great skill to have, and something that, just a quick check with your team when they come, whether it's a Skype call or a phone call. How are you? Simple. I'm going to come to Rob now. Is there anything you want to add here, Rob?
Yeah, so I think there's a few things around role models, and I think there's two ways we can be a role model. One is role modeling that it's okay to talk about mental ill health, and I think again, in the workplace, the more people that we do that, that's how we normalize the conversation. So storytelling around challenges of mental ill health in the workplace is very, very powerful. And I think that for health and safety professionals who are willing to do that, a good friend of mine, Clive Johnson, ex-Lansec, was very open about his challenges, for example. That really does create an impact. I think the other way that we can be role models is actually picking up on Jay's question as well. It's role modeling healthy behaviors. So if we as leaders, managers, people in the workplace, humans, can demonstrate that we are prioritizing our well-being, that we're focusing on sleep, that we're getting that exercise, that we're working on connecting, that we're taking breaks in the day, that we're taking holidays. If we can share these stories that we're doing that as part of our role in health and safety, then that can inspire others to follow suit. But I think it also can help us look after ourselves as we're doing that. So, for the bods that are looking after the bods and are leading the charge, as Jay said, put your own oxygen mask on first, is make sure you're looking after your own well-being. But by doing that, you are role modeling and setting an example and being an inspiration for others to do the same as well. So it's a bit of a win-win, I think, that one.
Thank you, Rob. So there's been a few questions asked in the chat, and it's something I was going to raise anyway. It's question 7. IOSH and many of us here have the viewpoint that prevention is better than finding a cure. Yet there's a little bit of a trend with companies relying on mental health first aiders. Do you believe that prevention is better than a cure? And if so, why? And I'm going to throw this out to any of the panelists.
Well, this is a bit of a hobby horse, so do you mind if I answer this first?
Yeah.
So when we started the business, what I wanted to talk about with people was how people improve their own mental health and how we prevent stress in the workplace. And I was really only connected with health and safety professionals. And basically all we could sell was mental health first aid, apart from to a few organisations who did actually see we need management training as well. Because as I said earlier, it is different. You do need to understand your duties as a manager. And if you've got managers who are mental health first aiders, you need to think about, is there a conflict of interest there? So that's the first thing. And I think it's been quite surprising to see how, given the hierarchy of risk control, that we should be looking at prevention before we look at handing out the first aid box, that this is where health and safety professionals have started. So yes, first aid is a good thing to have in place, most definitely. But you should also look at your organisation. Where are you causing stress in your organisation? So that probably requires you to work with your HR team to look at, for example, the pulse surveys that are coming in, to look at, do some employee forums, talk to people regularly, listen to stories, listen to what's happening with the HR team and the stress that people are reporting when they're going to HR. So there's something in there from an organisational perspective. And then there's also training your managers, the middle managers, to understand their duties, to understand how to listen to someone empathetically. And then finally, there's just training, because our literacy in this area is so low. When it comes to managing our own well-being, we don't have a clue, a lot of us, and it's now such a vast topic. Thinking about, I was on a webinar last night actually, and I think one of you mentioned it, about living at work. That creates a whole new set of challenges in this area as well. How do we as individuals learn to actually work from home and not work all hours and not feel we have to respond immediately to every email that comes through, and manage our time properly and all of those other things? So there's a stress prevention which happens at the individual level as well, is us understanding ourselves as well and improving our own literacy in that area. And I'm really pleased that people are now starting to move to that, as opposed to just the let's get out the first aid box, because that is the equivalent really of saying, well, I'm a health and safety professional and I have a good first aider, because that's what it is when you're talking about putting mental health first aid in and nothing else really.
Thank you for that. I agree with you there. Just going to come to Rob for this one, if you want to add a point.
Yeah, thanks, Robert. And yeah, for me, prevention is the future, and even prevention is the wrong word. It should be promotion. It should be promotion of positive health rather than preventing getting sick. And I think good practice for me looks like a literacy program, as Heather mentioned there, where we're looking at all the drivers of well-being, and you can take the 5 ways to well-being, but you need to add a few onto that as well. But social connection, really important. Do people understand the benefits of connection, and do they know how to do it in this remote workplace? I've worked with one insurance business who have had eight events for their staff through lockdown, where we've connected and allowed them to get together, and we've had some content on well-being, but it's really just been about their people connecting in a non-work setting virtually. But exercise, sleep, helping others is a good driver of well-being. Financial wellness, nutrition, all of these things that we can build literacy for people require a kind of educational program. And it's not just about recognizing mental health around World Mental Health Day and Mental Health Awareness Week. The best practice would be a regular monthly lunch and learn that focus on a different aspect of well-being, to just equip people to better manage their own well-being, and equip people to do that whilst working remotely, and help people connect with colleagues whilst working remotely. So I think the challenge is big, but good practice would involve proactively looking at and providing that literacy, as well as the benefits I mentioned previously.
That's fantastic, that, Rob. I'm just going to come to Joe then. Is there anything you would like to add, Joe?
No, I just reiterate what the guys have said about the suite of literacy and getting it out to people and making sure that they understand good mental health, good emotional well-being, understand that, before to say from a workplace perspective, that we're all in this together in terms of having to work remotely, having this sort of socially distance and not being in the office environment. But I've learned about today from these guys about how to basically connect, while not physically there, but to basically better utilization of online. I do think it says the best organisations that we're working with have genuine champions of mental health and emotional well-being. They're taking it extremely seriously in terms of coming at it from a positive angle, so not to create a stigma, not to automatically deter people away from it, to open up the doors, to turn around and say, look, mental health and emotional well-being, by its very definition, is a positive thing, and we all have a duty of care to look after it. And I think what that does, that creates a better connection. And we're going to talk about the dark stuff. And when you start to do all the sort of the take 5 steps for well-being, and as Rob said, add a few bits on, I think what I found anyway in the organizational context is you're getting more buy-in, and that buy-in will basically lead to better health and emotional well-being within the work setting. So what the guy said is just the added. I agree totally.
Fantastic, thank you, all the panelists, for that one there. I think there's a sense of communication and engagement there being essential to any method that you're trying to utilize there. So I'll move on to question 8 then. This is the last of our set questions, and then what we'll do is we'll move on to some Q&A. So question 8, there's been a lot of discussion over the past year over where wellbeing should sit within an organization, especially with the COVID-19 pandemic as well. Should it be a separate function? Should it be with health and safety? Should it be with HR? Or do we all have responsibility to play our part? And I want to come to Heather with that one first.
Yeah, I think this is a very interesting one. And I think it's been going on for more than a year. I remember having a debate at Safety and Health Expo with Dominic Cooper on this, because he very firmly believed that it shouldn't sit with health and safety, because he thought that actually it was actually endangering their role, which was really to prevent accidents. But for me, I think it depends on lots of things. It depends on the type of organisation that you're in. So is it one which, and your role within that organisation? So are you fundamentally front facing in terms of accident prevention? In which case, then it probably isn't best to fit in your role. And are you office based? Are you, what kind of risks do you run in that industry? But fundamentally, it can't sit with one person. It has to be something which is collaborative and worked together. So as a health and safety person, you can't really cut your HR team out. You have to work together on this, and your senior management team absolutely have to have buy-in, because when you do that stress risk assessment, you might find that, for example, that resources is an issue. So some people don't have the right laptops, so they don't have the right chairs at home. So you need buy-in from your operations people, your facilities people, whoever else, in order to be able to address that. So yes, it can be led from one place. It doesn't matter whether it's HR or health and safety, kind of depends on what industry you're in and the role you have, but it has to be a collaborative endeavour.
Brilliant, thank you for that, Heather. I want to come to Rob next on this one, if you want to make a point.
Yeah, I'd agree, Heather. We're not going to disagree much on this panel, which is always slightly disappointing for a panel discussion, isn't it? But you know, I think for me, we need exco or board level sponsorship of this issue if we want to get things done, and if we want to have the right resource allocated to developing an integrated and strategy, and we need boards to prioritize it. So I think, again, best practice would have a board member or an exco member that is really driving this forward, and preferably that would be the CEO or the CFO with support from the chief people officer. But it does take everybody to do this, and health is a core part of health and safety, and you guys are brilliant at safety. Actually, you know, it's really hard to fall off a ladder these days, isn't it? You know, or fall from height, because you've nailed safety predominantly, whereas health, we're just evolving our thinking as to how to support it, particularly mental health. So I think it is everybody's responsibility, and I think what we'll find in organizations is there's a groundswell, a willing army of people who want to make positive change on the mental health and well-being agenda if they're given permission to do so. So you've got the support there. And I think typically we're seeing you know, a rise in the kind of dedicated well-being role, whether that's head of well-being or even chief well-being officer in some large organizations now, which is great to see because they can really drive it forward. But I think Heather mentioned it before, one of the big blockers is the kind of line manager element that it kind of gets stuck there. You know, if you've got a board that's up for it, you've got a groundswell of people that kind of want to make change. Sometimes it's blocked at the line manager level. So I think there's a kind of PR exercise internally to kind of win over hearts and minds. But if you've got exco driving that, it'll happen quicker. If you've got people being open about their challenges at a senior level, it'll happen quicker. And then you can tap into that willing group you've got at the employee level.
Definitely need you middle management to facilitate these kind of schemes, and I love it about the internal promotion campaign. I think that's definitely right. I want to come to Liam next.
Yeah, so look, from my point of view, I would say from my experience working I work in construction, so from working from principal contractors right down to the subcontractor, I would say even at board level, and most occasions you tend to do get the support from the majority of people. From a safety or from an OSH professional point of view, I think that a lot of the drivers still needs to come from us in the first instance, and then obviously the education piece that the guys have talked about is obviously vitally important in the second instance. I think in the next sort of year or two, we will have to sort of address it in terms of, you know, what's it going to look like during the COVID. Well, we're already through this period, but what's it going to look like post-COVID? How to get people to spend and use their resource where they may be financially struggling. So for me, I think there is genuine support about it. I think for the OSH profession, including myself, and I would say probably anybody coming through, does need to look at upskilling themselves in this area. I would say have a basic understanding of it, but as like I touched on previously, having actual people who deal with it day in, day out is vitally important. And I think even this type of webinar or sort of genuine talks that can be shown to the general workforce is vitally important. So, I mean, ultimately, I think from an OSH point of view, and I know that that's what we're sort of trying to hint at today, we will need to drive it, and it'll be a constant sort of thing that we'll need to push. but hopefully with the likes of with the new generation of people coming through, and that's not the hint that the old generation should say that, but with the new generation of OSH professional coming through, I think that we're looking to broaden the horizons a lot quicker than previously was discussed. So hopefully in the years to come, the stigma will be broken down, like the guys have sort of mentioned, and I think there was a question asked in regards to the construction trade, which is a lot more difficult to break down the barriers. People do need a friend, and that's where the interpersonal and the softer skills do come in. So yeah, I think everything's very relevant that's been touched on already.
Thank you for that, Liam. I think just one of the questions that's been raised has really caught my eye, and it's how can we really drive the agenda to make a strong impact within the workplace? And they've put working in a construction environment, which is still male dominated, often opening up can be the hardest challenge. Sometimes signposting isn't the answer, as people need a friend and continual support. Any thoughts? I'll leave that open to the panelists.
Yeah, I could give that one a go for sure. I mean, I think, you know, it's interesting, male-dominated sort of macho cultures. I think that having male speakers, and I saw the reference to the kind of rugby, the reference, or athletes sharing their stories is quite helpful in that environment, because you know, if you see a strong, successful, confident man sharing their stories of mental ill health and their journey of recovery, that is very powerful in those male-dominated environments. I've done quite a lot of those talks myself. But I think there is power in supporting each other, as the question alluded to, really, the peer support, if we can create environments where people feel safe in doing so. And again, getting back to the form score, that's what it's all about. It's sharing how you're feeling with people you trust with a score out of 10, and then providing some literacy and some guidance on how to support each other. Because look, we can't fix people or diagnose people, and there's a point on the mental health continuum where you need professional help, and you need to inspire people to do that. But actually, if someone's just having a bad day or feeling a bit some stress, or is a 5 out of 10, a chat with a mate can really help with that. And that happens time and time again with me, because I'm fortunate enough to be so open. So I think there's a huge opportunity if we can create cultures of openness and connection with people on this issue, that we can better support each other and stop people getting to a 3 out of 10, which is when we might need that professional help. So I think that's a great opportunity, and one I'm pretty excited about working on.
Thank you for that. Heather, do you want to add something? You're looking like you agree with that.
Yeah, look, I absolutely agree. So as a middle class lady, I don't very often go into a construction site to talk about these issues, because I just think it's much better to send one of our male trainers, for example. So we've got an ex-fire commissioner that we work with, and that really works well. Also, I think it's a question of looking at language as well, because men, there's some research done on this, which you can look up from Chris Stein, Stein. He looks at language and how different, it's not just male and female, but different generations as well, like different language. So for example, older men, and when I say older, I'm counting myself in that category, so sort of 50 plus, don't like the idea of using the word anxiety. They'll use the word worry instead, whereas the younger demographic are happy with that language. So it's making sure that, and when you're promoting a session, perhaps you're not calling it mental health, perhaps you're calling it mental toughness or grit, or something that actually sounds more male. So I think, and I know it may not be very politically correct, but I think we need to really think about our language and really think about who we put in front of those audiences to absolutely get the message across.
Thank you for that.
Just to reinforce all that, our main sort of audience is sport clubs, men's sport clubs in particular, because Northern Ireland has a massive issue amongst male suicide. So I would really like what the guys have said in terms of we would get male sports stars or male role models who've been through sort of gambling addiction, drug addiction, have broken relationships, have been rock bottom, and then they tell their story to other men, which then inspires other people to open up. And we found that time and time again, when one man talks, another man listens. And if one man who listens connects, then therefore it opens up people to start to ask more questions, to feel more confident in themselves, because they've actually seen a success story of someone that's been rock bottom and who's now in a better place because inadvertently they talk, they got the support, and they are now on the sort of the men. So what the guys have said, if you're going to deal with men, especially in a macho, masculine environment, be it a work site or a man football club, it's important that you create that connection. And use of language, as Heather alluded to, is vitally important, because if you go in, for example, I don't go in this sports club wearing a suit, track suit, dress like them, understand, play with them, and all of a sudden that connection inadvertently creates sort of the confidence to then open up and talk about sort of the range of issues that they're going through. So I just wanted to add that in.
Right, thank you for that. I appreciate that. The last question I'm going to ask them before we round off. Certain roles are remunerated handsomely to deal with the high levels of pressure and demands that come with the job. How do we begin to address this when there's an expectation that those who can manage peak performance over longer periods are the most desirable candidates? I'm going to leave it open to all panelists.
Sorry, I'm struggling to understand. Hello, Kay. I'm just rereading the question.
While Heather does that, I'd like to answer David's question, actually, because I think it's a really good one as well. So I'll give Heather a bit of time. But the problem with a lot of construction sites is you have subcontractors who are there for a short period of time. And I think this is really interesting as to the responsibility of big business or bigger business to support their subcontractors, their supply chains. And I think there's some really good stuff that we can do if we choose to think a little bit more broader than what is the employee. And so where I've seen some good practice is when organizations put on events that they pull in all of the subcontractors, they pull in all of the supply chain and share good practice, or even resources sometimes, or benefits sometimes, because it's the right thing to do and because they can. Now, appreciate that some businesses might not have the financial resources to do that, but I think where we can, it's important to look beyond our walls. And for me, that's really heartwarming when I see that sort of good practice being done.
I'm just going to echo that as well. Some examples I've seen when I worked in the construction industry were some of the bigger firms. Example, Berkeley Homes had a five-side football tournament, which I felt was really good, got everyone involved. And there's another one for some of the small companies to be able to do was to just have a little kitty set aside to be able to take the team bowling, because they were working away from home. That team sport, it was something different that they were doing at night, that they were doing together. So although they were missing the families, it was still something nice for them to do and to have that human social interaction. I'm going to come back to Heather now. I think she might have an answer for us there, if possible.
She thought you got away with it, Rob.
I get this wrong, Kay, because I'm not sure I entirely understand what you're saying. But I think what you're saying is that certain roles have a huge amount of pressure and demand placed upon them, but actually that isn't the best way to manage peak performance. I mean, I don't know, my experience is that people who are often very good at their jobs actually don't seem to work that hard. They seem to be able to step back and really look at what's important and really understand, what am I going to have to do today which is going to make the biggest difference. And I look at those people in awe and I think, goodness me, how can I work less hard? I need to learn how to do this. But some professionals are very, very good at this. I apologize if that's not what you were asking. Do you want to pick it up, Rob? Do you understand it?
No, I've just had a look at it now. And I think the point I'd make on this is it doesn't matter what you earn. Yes, you will get paid a lot of money for certain levels of responsibility, but whatever you earn, your life is normalized, and you still need to be able to prioritize your well-being. So there's many CEOs and board level people who earn a vast amount of money who are under intense amount of stress and pressure right now because of what the world is throwing at their companies and the weight of responsibility of looking after their people in the uncertain times. So for me, they need to prioritize their well-being. They need to be supported as well as others. They need to support themselves in the peer groups, because this isn't a level thing. This is a human thing. And I think we can all support each other a little bit better. So, I think, yes, great. We should reward people for high stress jobs, but we should also equip them to deal with that stress and prioritize their well-being too.
I'm just going to touch on that. Sorry, go on, Heather.
I was just going to say, when we look at people who have come out and said, look, I was in a really high pressure job, this is what happened to me. That's actually really helpful, isn't it? Those senior people that come out and explain how it all got too much for them. And I certainly, I know Clive's a friend of mine as well as yours, Rob, and he and I had a lot of chats about both of our propensity to say yes to everything, and not want to turn anybody down, because you want to be helpful.
Yeah, I'm just going to touch on that. There's a great book out there called Peak Performance, and it actually tells you how the best athletes in the world that are breaking world records, they actually learn how to rest the body, and they take periods of rest to get the best out of both the mental and physical state. So I recommend that to anyone out there as well. I think we're kind of there for time now, so I want to come around to each panelist. One thing that you can give us today that we can take away for future OSH professionals to benefit from that. And I'll go to Liam first.
For future OSH professionals, I think it's all about developing the soft and the interpersonal skills. So try and sort of do your studying and do your working on this health and safety side of it, but also work on those softer ones, and trying to communicate with people is vitally important for me.
Thank you, Liam. Joe, you're next.
Look after number one. Because you don't look after number one, you can't look after anybody else. It's just
Thank you.
Right there.
Thank you, Joe. Heather, I'm going to come to you now.
Look at what success means to you, and try to actually define that for yourself in a way which actually then empowers you to look at what's important moving forward.
Thank you, Heather. Rob, I will finish with you.
Thank you. Give yourself the gift of a few moments of self-reflection a day to answer that question, how are you doing? And think, how might you be able to tweak that? And then share that with people close to you, and look to support them when they're feeling low. If the mood takes you, use the form score to do it. But if not, just check in, because we need to be a little bit more connected right now, and we can do it if we try.
Thank you, everyone, for being able to attend this, and thank you to all the panelists for the great advice and the discussion that we've had today. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks for having us. It's been great. Thank you.